I actually watched Rob's second one because I actually really wanted to know like what his deal is with like going to London because I hadn't really seen him, and then he was gone. I was like, I really want to know what's going on. Are we recording already?
Well, I was usually I start by asking you to introduce yourself. Mm-hmm. So it is recording. If you want that to be in, we can I can leave it in.
No, I was like gonna bring up something related, but then we can also like start and like
well, should we start the podcast?
Yeah, let's start the podcast.
Let's start the podcast. So I usually start as a lazy host of the podcast, have the guest introduce themselves. It's also my way of, in case I mispronounce somebody's name.
That's very smart because most people can't. That's why I'm called Freddi. My name is Freddi. My real name is Freddi Gralle because I'm German. But I think I normally go by Freddi Gralle. Like the Holy Grail, that seemed fitting.
Freddi Gralle, I was like, I don't know. I thought Freddi Gralle was pretty easy, but yeah, Frederica. There's also there's like an H sound in the German pronunciation. That's
whatever.
Yeah.
It's a normal German name. It's not. Well, you know. I'm a German comedian who is doing comedy in English for reasons that we might get into, and I've been doing it for about 7 years now. Pretty much exactly 7 years, and for a while I did German as well for like 3 years, and then I stopped, and I love it very, very much.
Oh, I love it. That's a lovely place to start. And I have to say, I also want to just butter your bread a little bit up top. But you're one of the people for me that like when I showed up in Berlin. Like, you know, you start to meet the people who are like, oh, this is like an established person in the scene, and like everybody has a little, and you were always like from the start, like you were very sweet to me, and you were very like, oh, hi, like, how are you doing? And like, I remember one time at this dark comedy show, I had this bit that I was working on, and like it was very not finished, and you're like, there's something there, and I feel like now I figured it out.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Like,
nice.
Or like, I don't know, not figured it out, but now it's like a thing that works, and I for sure would have abandoned it, but I thought multiple times, I was like, Freddi said there was something to that, and I should keep at this.
Freddi is wise. Yeah. Is a wise old woman. Well, maybe the reason that I don't feel like or like I shouldn't talk to like new beginners is like I think I just started, like I think 7 years is nothing, and like I feel like when I started I've already felt that I was late to the game because all like the really crazy stories had already happened. Like, you know, when they really started, like there were all these like crazy, you know, Paul Salamoni and stuff. It was like, you know, just like one open mic in a bar and everybody was drunk all the time. And it was just like, I was like, oh, I guess this is like super boring because we have like one mic a night now. Yeah. And like everybody liked each other more or less and hung out, you know, every night. So I think that's why for me, it's like, it was just last year that I realized that a lot of times I am the most established comic on an evening, and that is like so embarrassing to me because I'm like if that was, you can't say that in the UK or the US. It's just like this is just wrong. So,
but do you feel like that's because I have generally I feel like my disposition in life is this battle between my ego side, which thinks people should shut up and listen to me, but also just a usual very common thread of like, oh, like I'm a fraud, this is like I'm not good enough or whatever. So like, is that something that you feel outside of comedy? Or
I mean, of course, like in this scene, like I do feel like very comfortable because I've known most of these spaces like for a long time, and like most of the people who host mics I've you know, because they're normally like the more established ones. And so you really go back with people for many years. And of course, it makes you more relaxed, and like it's easier to write things that are like, that work like, not from the beginning maybe, but you know, so you relax. But I mean, like the bombing or the, is my story still interesting? Because I, like you, I talk very much about my biography. So it's like very connected to my identity. And if people are like, yeah, can you just shut up talking about religion? Like nobody cares.
Yeah.
I'm like, but that's the only thing I have.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's always like very personal to me, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, I heard a comedian on a podcast say something that I thought was like really kind of profound, and he was like, you know, people say like, you should just like shake it off if someone says you're like not funny, and he's like, but most of us who are like doing comedy, it's like I built a big part of my personality around the idea, like the pillar of like, I'm funny, I want to be funny, you know, like, and you're like sharing super personal stuff, and so when someone's like, it's not for me, you're like,
yeah. I mean, to be honest, I don't really feel like I'm necessarily a funny I feel like I'm quite a serious comedian, because I kind of like the subject. I'm not like a goofy comedian, for example. And like whenever people ask me like, oh, so have people like always told you that you're funny? I always say no, they told me that I was mean. And that like way more describes my humor, I think. Yeah. That's like self-deprecating, and I'm quite aggressive towards the audience sometimes. So I think that's like more it. And I was gonna say something else. What did you say?
About that for me, I feel like being funny was like one of the pillars of my and then with my solo show, I'm like, I want to be confident enough that even if I know like people are not, you know, can't connect with religion, for example, as a topic, or don't find me funny, that at least I'm gonna tell them a really interesting story. So like at least I think it's gonna be satisfying for them on that level, even if they don't find me funny. Yeah. And then I'm like, I'm okay with that. Yeah, totally. If you...
But I won't be able to like save a bad set just like Tyrone, who just like, you know, loses his mind and does crazy things with a microphone. Like that's just like never going to be me, you know?
Yeah.
I'm not a natural in that way, I would say.
Yeah. Well, I feel like what's also interesting about what you just said, it also ties into the Tyrone thing, is for me, being, you know, very new and like really starting out, it really gets to me when people don't laugh. And so even like if I feel like, like I've done some storytelling shows and I'm like, this story doesn't need to be like laugh. Like there's something interesting happening and they're listening. Yeah. But it still makes me uncomfortable where I'm like, no, laugh. Like,
but I mean, you know that there are like a million reasons why people don't laugh. I mean, it might be just the general attitude of the room. I mean, of course, like if everybody killed and just you bombed, like of course that's like hard to shake off. But you know, it's often like maybe the host didn't connect super well in the beginning, and so it was like a bad start. And I don't know. I'm just like, okay, we didn't connect today.
Yeah, which I think is like, that's probably like a healthier.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that comes with time. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, so before we like totally dive into the comedy thing, I wanted to like hear a little bit about like your childhood and stuff. Like, so I know you come from this kind of like, I don't want to use, the only word I can think of is extreme, and it makes me.
Speak for yourself, you fucking liberal.
I was like, that feels rude, and I don't want to say extreme, but you came from.
I'm just a very passionate person.
Yeah, you came from a very religious background.
Yeah, so it's like really hard to explain. It's like a very specific niche. So my parents are like they're Baptists, which is evangelical Christian. So it's like very like morally quite conservative. I don't think they are like politically conservative necessarily, but like in Germany, it's like a very small minority, which means that normally people thought I was in a cult. And I mean, I do think a lot of the evangelical church is a cult, but I think like most of what I experienced in my life was probably not. Yeah. It's just kind of like a church community with things that most people don't believe.
Yeah.
At a very fundamental level. But it definitely was also in like groups that I would say, looking back, like, oh, that was pretty culty.
And so, like, if it's such a minority in Germany, like, how did your parents end up? Like, were they evangelical? Were their parents evangelical Baptists, or were they a different type of?
Yeah, I think they were both Baptists already when they met. They met smuggling Bibles into Romania in like the 70s.
Holy shit, that's
like into the East Bloc. They did like a mission trip.
Yeah.
And then they met, and my dad wanted to marry my mom after like 2 weeks, and it was like very much like.
Jesus, this is Lord, like a script right now.
I know, the Lord led us together. Yeah. Because they both already knew that they wanted to go into the mission field, which is like they both wanted to go to Africa to tell people about Jesus. Mm-hmm. And so I think that connected them even more. My mom at first was like, I'm not so interested. But then eventually, I don't know why.
I'm sorry, but I'm just fixated on this Bible smuggling.
It's wild.
Like, cause like, how do you know like what their techniques were? Because like I know the drug tech. You put it in the tires, or you tear out the back seats, or something.
I mean, to be honest, it was like young people. I don't know how much the border control is like looking for Bibles.
They don't have dogs Bible dogs.
Smells like really thin paper.
Yeah, I smell Jesus.
It's a good question. I never really asked. I assume maybe they just wrapped it in like different things and had just like everyone had like a couple of, maybe it was just New Testaments, very like the Gideons. I would say like very small. I don't really know if it was like big leather bound. Yeah,
they were like, look, we can spread the word of Jesus, but in a small,
just the easy stuff. It's wild.
So your parents were and I've always been interested in that, like, so when you end up doing something like where you're like going somewhere to spread the good word, do you like is that, do you have like, is the church paying for your experience, or do you have to like spend the money yourself? Or
it's, I think a lot of it is like you have to raise the money somehow, or you have to pay for it, which is amazing. Like you pay. I mean, it's a lot of free labor. I mean, I did so much volunteer work in the church. And I think when I was a young adult, I like didn't understand how people made money, because all my talents were always used in like voluntary ways. And I'm like, I just don't understand how people make money. But I think when my parents then later lived in Sierra Leone with me and my brother and my other brother, and I think that was paid for. It was just like a job. There was they were like, we were looking for an eye doctor. My mom's an eye doctor. And then they went, and it was just like they got a salary.
Okay. Yeah. And is there some version, and I apologize if my like Christian, I think you'll enjoy this, but like, so, my parents sent me to a Catholic college. I grew up with like no exposure. And my first year at the Catholic college, like you were required to take these religion courses. And so the first one was called like Matthew, Mark, Luke. And I was like, who's Matthew, Mark?
And why was John not there? John's the best.
And that was the first time I'd ever read the Bible.
Oh, wow. So you never went to like Christmas services or anything?
No.
That is like, I mean, that's so foreign to me. Like, what do you do on Christmas? Like, because, I mean, your parents must have explained something to you about like why people sell it, or like why it was established or something.
Well, we celebrate Christmas because Santa Claus has been working hard all year on those presents.
It sounds very capitalist.
We celebrate Christmas because Coca-Cola told us that Santa...
because that's definitely not a religion.
No, I mean, Christmas for... Like, we celebrated all of the... I think, like, a lot of Americans... or at least in the area where I grew up, it's like we celebrated all of the like Easter, Christmas, actually just those basically.
Yeah,
but,
I mean the others are weird.
Yeah, but from a very capitalistic, like it was like Easter was about chocolate and finding the eggs and the bunny, and Christmas was about the tree. And
but I thought it was just like in school, like people would get. I think just because my idea of the States is like that, it's like so Christian value based. Mm-hmm. That it's like thrown at you.
I mean, I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, so It was.
But even like public schools now, it's just like just hippies. It was just like the only prerequisite to being a teacher is that you're a fucking hippie.
Yeah, basically. They were like,
you have to be on drugs.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we don't trust you with our kids.
They're like, do you smell like essential oils? Come on in. Teach our children. No, I mean, I guess maybe there was some, I mean, like, you know, we did the Pledge of Allegiance, which was the whole under God thing. But really, I can't, yeah, I don't know. It was just like the norm. It was just, you know, you read and like do math and science and.
Yeah, it was really weird. I moved to Leipzig, so I'm from the West. I'm from West Germany, and then
don't brag.
I know. It was amazing. The sun was always shining. And then in '99, so like 10 years after the wall came down, I moved to Leipzig to study, and I was even shocked because obviously it's super like one of the most atheist places in the world. I think East Germany was. And like people just like did not know. And I did a gap year in Great Britain after school. And that's when I became like a real born again Christian, because my parents are actually like quite liberal, but I like got really into it. And so I was like on fire for Jesus. And then I met people who like didn't even know what people did in church. They were like, so do you talk about like politics? Because, you know,
which is also very like an East German thing.
Totally.
Like.
Because I think like when the wall came down, the peaceful demonstrations, they were like organized sort of by pastors in the church, but they weren't really Christian at all. And so I was like, oh my God, this country is so lost.
Yeah.
And it is.
So were you born in Germany? Like when did you guys move to... Like, so your parents are smuggling Bibles. Yeah. Then
they get married after 6 months.
And
then they have me and my
3
brother.
months after that. No.
And then actually what I like about their story is so they both knew that they wanted to go to Africa. That was like their dream. And that's the reason that they got married. But then it took them, I think, another 9 years to actually make it happen.
Oh, wow.
But they were still like always like still had it in their mind that they wanted to go. And then, so I was 2 when we went, and I was like 6 when we came back. So it was like 4.5 years.
Okay. And do you remember like how, because like my memories of 2 to 6 are not like, they're more like it's like sensations or something, you know? Do you have a lot of clear memories from that time?
I feel like I do, yeah. We had American neighbors from Indiana. That's why I got my beautiful Midwestern accent.
I know. People say that she has more of an American accent than I do, and it drives me nuts.
Well, you have a quite specific... I feel like you have a very West Coast accent, right?
Yeah. And it's definitely... my accent has been affected by living here, I think.
Oh, yeah. I've heard that from other expats, like native speakers, yeah. I'm so sorry.
No,
dragging you down to no, I feel like I just have a lot of memories of like playing like my older brother. He was really into like Lord of the Rings when he was 8 or something. He's like
my guy,
gifted, you know. He was like a very early reader, and he made up all these worlds, and he drew maps of all the trees on the compound that we lived in. And so we would like just climb trees a lot. I feel like it sounds like very African, doesn't it? And then just like playing with the girls, and and like bumpy roads and like really hot food. That's like mostly.
And was that something that your parents would like? So then after that, did you guys move back to Germany?
Yeah, then we moved back to Germany to a very small city in Niedersachsen, which is near Hanover, where my dad was then a pastor for a long time. And then I think I was like the only nostalgic person who like always kept asking my parents, like even now, like, tell me stories. Cause I'm like, for me, it's been like a really big part of my identity just because of the bilingual stuff. For my older brother, I don't think he's maybe just not the nostalgic type, but he like never talks about it. Yeah. I'm just like, please.
Can someone validate my experience?
Exactly. It's like super weird. And then my younger brother and sister, like they didn't really remember it. And so... so it was like kind of weird.
And so it wasn't something then that your parents would like continue to bring up or kind of be like, I remember our time in...
Yeah, I mean sometimes, but I think they were just like busy, you know. They had 4 children, and I don't know, maybe they're also not the types.
Now if you're a pastor, do you get paid to be a pastor, right?
You do get paid to be a pastor. In Germany, you have the church tax, which normally pays like the Catholic and the Protestant people. But in our case, every church kind of pays their own pastor. So if you have a small church, the pastor doesn't get as much money. So we were.
Is that what those donation things?
Yeah,
going?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You tithe.
They're like, better sermon next time. Only worth €4 today.
Exactly.
I think that would be
It's
hilarious.
like a donation.
It's like a donation show.
I mean, that's basically how our show is. That's why you have the besto as a closer, so people give more money.
Yeah. That cracks me up to think about like this, the pastor at the end of the sermon being like, I feel like this sermon was worth €10. If you work at a tech startup, maybe €20.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, in the Christian world, it's called tithing, and you're supposed to give kind of 10% to the church, which is quite a lot actually. But I mean, maybe in Germany, people should invest 10% of their income in humor. Yeah, it's very hacky.
I would even say the arts. You know, yeah.
I think it's good because most people don't pay church taxes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Anya, my wife, she somehow, I think she told me she did one of the things you do when you're like 15 or 16.
Like
because
confirmation?
Because she was like, her family was not super religious. Like they didn't go to church very often. But she was like, oh, you get, like everybody gives you money if you do that. So she did that, but then she had to pay the church tax.
Oh, yeah, because then you're part of the church.
Yeah, exactly. And so then last year she had to go through this whole thing, and she had to go there hard. Like 5 or 6 times, and it was like
it's super annoying.
Ordeal. Yeah.
Even I was just like put in the system, even though I never did the confirmation thing, just because.
You're like, haven't I given enough?
I think, I know, of myself. I think they just automatically you're put in the system, and you have to actively quit.
Yeah. Interesting. So you grow up in West Germany. Your dad is the pastor. Is that like?
It's super cool. Yeah.
It's super cool.
I was always so embarrassed to say that to people.
But was it like? Because I don't know. Like I had a friend whose dad was the vice principal at our school, and that was brutal for him.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
And so I'm like. Pastor, I feel like you could go both ways. Like at the church, the pastor's kind of cool, right?
Sure, yeah. I mean, yeah, of course. In the church, you're like the cool kid, maybe. I mean, my dad is like a very non-authoritative, if that's a word, person. He's just like it's like the softie, like very kind of goofy and nice. So he's not like a weird guy. So that was always nice. But like, yeah, in school, or like I once got caught shoplifting when I was like 12. I shoplifted for a long, long time, and they caught me, and I had to go to the police station. And then they were like, "So, what do your parents do for?" Oh, that was horrible. And he had to pick me up and stuff.
What? Why were you? What?
Okay, here's the thing. I really don't feel remorse. I got given very little pocket money because we didn't have a lot of money, I think. And I really liked...
Dad needed to fire up those sermons.
I know. And I really liked makeup. And so I shoplifted a lot. I think it was mostly candy and makeup. And it was a silver nail polish. And I got caught. And I don't know. I think for me, it was just like there's a shop with so many products and I have none. Yeah. You know? And like... why would it hurt the shop if I take a couple? Like, I really didn't understand it, and I still kind of agree.
Especially like the big makeup companies or like candy
it just seemed like really unfair, and it's like unattainable to. And like my mom was so out of touch with reality because she never wore makeup that I had like so much makeup when I was like 13. Like she didn't even understand that I couldn't buy that with my pocket money. That it was like hundreds of Deutschmark, you know.
And so what was your parents' reaction to that?
Well, it was like they were like, okay, we're not going to punish you because going to the police in a police car is probably punishment enough. And I think they're right. But that also meant, like, I had nightmares after that of just, like, being caught by this detective and having to go to the back room. And then I tried to hide it. But then they eventually... And I was feeling, like, so guilty, I think. But then because they were like, hey, we're like just gonna let it go, I felt like I couldn't really bring it up anymore because I was like, of course I was like happy that they didn't like, but then I was just like alone with my nightmares, and I don't know. And of course I continued till I was
okay. I was going to
16
ask you,
or
did you keep shoplifting?
Yeah, because they didn't raise my pocket money.
So it was all about the need, because
Yeah.
to me, I don't know, like I also think of shoplifting as like there's a kind of a thrill to it.
I mean,
know?
that too, I'm sure, that you feel like powerful. And it was like, I'm like really old. So back in the day, they didn't have cameras. They didn't have the codes. So it was like really easy.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, you like.
Yeah, there was
conquer the
no
system.
little. I remember when they introduced those little things
and
that
we
you
were
would
all
walk
scared.
through or whatever. Yeah. So then you go to college in the UK. You said no. You took a gap year in the UK.
I did a gap year with like a missionary organization where we went to churches and told them how to tell people about Jesus. I mean, I was like 18.
And how is your how is your kind of personal faith? Was your faith kind of like growing as you got older? Were there waves to it? Was it like steady and then you got into this missionary thing? Like,
yeah, I think it was like I went to like at school. I went to church like maybe once a month. Like my parents never forced me to go to church, but I kind of actually, for me, it was like a little like a meditative. I think, like that. I would just like sit there and like think about my own thoughts, and I kind of liked that it was like a peaceful atmosphere, and then there was like music and stuff.
I gotta steal that red lipstick
Exactly. Let's make a plan.
Yeah.
God help me. Bless my endeavors. And I think, I just wanted to go abroad for a year, and obviously a lot of these organizations that offer that are Christian, and it was like a family friend that did it, and then I didn't go like overseas. I was like in the UK and like went to like all different churches within a year with like a team. And I think it was during that, because I was just like so in this environment, and there were a lot of young people that were like really like on fire for God. And I think I was just like really impressed by it. I think there was a sort of like extremism that I think most young people are like. I think like if I'd found Amnesty International, at that point I probably would have become like a environmentalist warrior or something. And so I think I just really like the community and faith is like really existential. It's like literally about life and death. And so that I think that felt cool in a weird way.
Totally.
And so I stuck with it.
Well, it's I was just talking to someone about this, how, because she was saying like, I don't understand people who are like big fans of, obsessed with like some musician or whatever. And I was saying, I think it's kind of like the answer, like young people's answer to kind of what you were finding, which is like, when you're young, you're looking for like meaning and also who you are.
Exactly.
And you're just like trying to grab, like at least from my perspective, it's like I was like, am I this thing? And I tried that and I was like, oh, I don't think I'm that. And then I'm like, am I?
Yeah.
Like it was like.
I think for a lot of people it's music, right? And you identify with the subculture.
Yeah, totally.
And like I used to be like really into certain bands. I was like a huge Radiohead fan, whatever. And now I don't get excited about anything on that level anymore. So it doesn't, like, it could have been religion or something else. I think as a young person you just want to like fight, or if you see like the young climate, like the Fridays for Future, I think it's like the same thing. It's just like so cool to have something that makes you feel like, I think maybe it makes you feel more grown up or something.
Grown up, and also like you're a part of this thing, because I think that's the thing with the music is you're like, or like the subculture of being a fan of a certain band or whatever, you're like, we have the same ideals,
and the others don't understand us, and
exactly.
There's like a code language,
and a little bit of it is like, and we're better than them.
Yeah, exactly. Especially with music, I think.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I can't believe you listen to R&B.
Yeah. The funny thing is like, so I was like super, when I was like 21, 22, I was like very into
The Grateful Dead.
The Grateful Dead. No, that came later. No, I was very into like EDM and like dubstep and like Skrillex, and this was like just becoming a thing. And it's funny to me now because like I remember being, and I still like the music. I say it, but like it's funny when I think about like I was like, everybody is so stupid, like that they don't get this. This is the coolest thing that's happening. And now I'm like, well, it wasn't the coolest thing that was happening, but I enjoyed it. It was a fun thing to be a part of for a moment.
Totally. And I mean, at least it was like an actual, like a new phenomenon. So in a way, it was like very avant-garde. Yeah.
So and when you got like, how did you describe it? Like fired up for, or on fire for,
Born Again.
Yeah. And so what is like, how does that make your life different to be, you know, like you're going to church more often, or you're like, you're trying to be more, is the word proselytizing? I don't know. What's the thing where you're like trying to get other people to be in the church?
It's a really hard word. I never, it's everything. I think that's also what is so culty about it, that basically your whole thinking changes because everything is suddenly kind of in this black and white thinking. Like, is it like furthering and nurturing your faith or not? Is it getting you closer to God or further away? So there's like a lot of like, this is good and like this is to be condemned, and you see people like that. I think that's like the most fucked up thing about it, aside from like the sexuality stuff, that I felt like I couldn't, like at uni, like I couldn't just meet people. It was always like, and I had a lot of like non-Christian friends, but it was always like, I should kind of invite them to come to church. And it's always through that lens, which is really not nice, because you don't see the people as people.
And are you dreading the inviting them to church?
Yeah, it's horrible. I don't want to invite them because I know they're not going to like it.
Because like, it's like, you're like, I don't want you to come to church. You don't want to come to church, but I have to do this thing.
So absurd. It's so true. And so you're always like stuck in this awkwardness. So I kept the worlds very separate, which is, I mean, I think a lot of people have that, even people that grew up in different cultures and, you know, keep things separate. It's not that crazy, but it is exhausting to a certain degree, and it's not fun because you want to be a whole person. But,
totally. Well, and then I definitely had that because one of my many personalities that I tried on was like, I was like very into like sports, and I was kind of like a big bro in college and stuff. I know. I know. I was like, is this what it means to be a man?
You had short hair, or did you always have long hair?
I had short hair. For years I just had like a buzz cut and a very clean cut. Yeah. But I always had a little bit of this feeling of like I'm being fake, or like I'm a fraud or something from that. And also like with my parents, like having two moms, it's like there was this, it sounds stupid and it wasn't such a big deal, but like it sometimes it was hard for me to like tell people because no one assumes that you have two moms. That's why I look like this. They're like, now we get it. but you know, like as a 20-year-old, it's like they just mention your parents, you like your dad or whatever, like, oh, what does your dad do? And you're like,
I don't have a dad. And you're like, oh, single mom. No.
Or like, honestly, sometimes I would just be like, you know, like just try, you know, you just get the question off without actually addressing it. And then that made me feel so icky and like,
of course.
But so, you're born again, you're kind of torn between these two worlds. And so because now would you say you're agnostic, or?
Yeah, I think I'm like very, very agnostic. Like, I think I will never, ever say again that I'm like sure about it. That's why to me, like these super, like convinced atheists are just as absurd, you know, because I'm like, how can you can't be sure, you know.
Would you have like that, you have a bit kind of about this, the difference between, and I think it's so funny. It's like such a good bit.
I do. It is fun to like, I think even when I started comedy, because I literally, I wrote my first set in the Easter Sunday service, and then I like never went back to church.
Really?
Yeah. And then because I think maybe I had been to one mic to watch. I went through like a guy who's not really doing stand-up anymore so much, Georg. He's also German, who did English comedy, and he was at my film school. And and so I was like kind of like solo Christian when I started. And I also like started making fun of me as a Christian immediately. Like that was like the purpose of starting stand up. But it was always funny because I knew I had a different perspective, because everybody was like, you know, we don't believe in anything. We're hedonists. We want sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I mean, I was like terrified of it. I mean, I was very curious also. It was like very exciting. But I also kind of really knew like, oh, like I have a good angle because nobody has that angle, and I can make fun of atheists, and that's like fun.
Totally. Well, and there's something, what I love about that too is that it's like there's you know, like there's this type of hedonist Berlin atheist thing, and they love to say that they're like all about kind of like, we accept everybody in all their forms, but at the same time they're like, but you can't dress like that. Can't dress like that. No, it can't be like that. Don't believe in that.
We have to be cool.
Yeah. Be cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like super funny. Yeah. I mean, I think like the comedy world is cool because I do think that they're very different people that come together. Maybe from the outside it doesn't seem like, maybe from the outside it seems like, oh, it's all like cynical people who have attention problems or something, or like, you know, who want a lot of attention and attention problems. I don't know. But I feel it's like quite varied, like personality. You have like these crazy extroverts, you have crazy introverts.
Yeah,
from all over. And
I totally agree. I mean, I think whatever attention seeking affliction, there is a through line there. But that was also another thing that I felt when I came over to Berlin, was and like, yeah, I don't know. I think this is a horse that's been beat to death, so I don't want to talk to. But it's like the stand-up scene in the States. When I went, it was like so many just like, not like just white guys, but also like just tech guys who are like, don't like their job, coming to do stand-up, you know. And I came here, and you're like, oh, there's real diversity, and as you say, it's like, between extrovert and introvert, where people are from, what type of humor they have. Like,
I mean, I do think that the English scene is quite middle class, because most people that I think are encouraged or like have it in their vision for their life to like move abroad and stuff are often middle class people. Yeah. So I don't think there are a lot of working class, but there are some. And also not like super rich people, maybe a couple. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point though. There is like the economic kind of
that part
diversity.
is not super diverse, and it's in the German scene. It's maybe a little more, but I'm not.
Yeah, but I mean, but I maybe also. I can think of a few people who came from backgrounds in the scene who are like came from backgrounds who were poor or like you know, not well off, and then, you know, figured out a way to make it and then kind of then was like, oh, now I'm at the level of comfort that I'm like, can I go on stage?
Totally.
Yeah. But so before we get into the comedy thing, because I feel like we're kind of naturally going there nicely, but I wanted to finish hearing about like this transition. So you go to Leipzig, and you're like, nobody knows nobody knows about Jesus, or you know, like what like how does that progression go from being, you know, born again to becoming agnostic?
So it was like it was weird because like in East Germany, like the Christians that were there were like freaks kind of, because they were like a persecuted minority. Like in the GDR, you couldn't be a Christian. So they were like really weird, and I like didn't connect to them at all.
They were like smuggling Bibles.
Oh my God. And so I totally doubled down. And in Germany, there's like a youth movement. It sort of still exists, called Jesus Freaks, that are like kind of, it started in the 90s, like kind of hippies and metalheads and a lot of punks that became Christians, and like young people, and who kind of started their own thing. And so in Leipzig, we just started our own church at like 22 years old.
Wow. Can you just do that? Or
yeah, I mean, it's like in our it was like a non-denominational church. You basically just register as a Verein, as an organization. And we had like, you know, meetings, and like, I mean, we didn't really have a lot of money or anything, but just to rent out, you know, something where we could meet. And so we just kind of did our own music and preaching, and yeah, it was kind of wild. So, I mean, it was also like exciting just to do anything, like kind of pioneering in a way.
Yeah.
So that was like, I think like my most on fire years. And so I did a lot of like public speaking then. I once preached at a festival called Freakstock, in front of like 5,000 or 6,000 people.
Wow.
So, yeah. So, you know,
Was that a rush?
Yeah, it was. I loved it.
Yeah.
Surprisingly.
Yeah.
And I also, what I did, I translated a lot of sermons. So I would be on stage in front of hundreds and hundreds of people. And because it was quite international, so they always needed somebody to translate. And so that's, I think, when I got really comfortable speaking in front of people. So that part of stand-up, like, was always just, like, not a problem. So that was, like, really hardcore Christian. And then I lived in a commune outside of Leipzig for a year. Like a monastic commune where we had like 4 prayer times every day. And
were your parents like,
yay.
Fuck yeah? I mean, sorry if they're watching. I mean, or I don't know.
Will. Yeah, I think, I mean, it was my 3 siblings aren't super religious. So it was definitely like the one thing that me and my parents always talked a lot about, like church work kind of.
Yeah. Well, also like if you're doing preaching and stuff.
Yeah,
like
and my dad is
your dad's.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely, I think they were sort of proud of me probably in a way, yeah. Mm-hmm. And then I moved to Berlin eventually because I wanted to go to film school. And I think film school was when it started to like wear me down. I think I was just like, it was like so intense. Like I was like in the classroom with like the same people for 3 years, like every single day. And so you really get to know each other and you really kind of like let your hair down, like see people, let people see you for who you are eventually, you know? And like they knew that I was Christian. I didn't really mention it so much because I didn't want to be in that box necessarily, but I still went to church every Sunday. And I was also quite active there. And I had one really bad breakup that kind of, I think, tore me open a little bit because I'd like not dated for a really long time. And then I met somebody and I was like, oh my God, this is my husband, whatever. And it didn't work out. And I was like, I couldn't believe that he left me because I was like so sure it was like the Christian marriage now. Like, because I'd always been like a really good girl around guys. So I was like, well, I'm sure there's going to be a reward for being a good girl, right?
Yeah, then, I've been doing all the right things.
I know, like
that's how it works for my parents. Like,
I know, right? And so that was really like, it was good for me, I think, especially going to film school, because then I was like, there's no meaning in life. Yeah. Sort of, it was like definitely like a first breakdown. And then, I eventually, I mean, even all through film school, I didn't have sex at all and didn't take drugs and stuff. It was, but then like shortly after
that was the one thing I also wanted to ask that you just remind me was like, so that's one of the things I most associate with the whole like Christian thing is this like dynamic of like sin and because like with my own path, like, so my parents kind of raised me like a Buddhist, but it was like it was just kind of like that was their thing. Like I didn't care, you know. Mm-hmm. And then when I was like 21, 22, I had this like kind of breakdown. I was super depressed. It was like very bad. And one of the things, like, I kind of turned to that Buddhist philosophy again. And one of the things that I really discovered about myself was it was like that I was being such an asshole to me. You know, like I just thought like I was like, I'm a piece of shit. Like I can't get it together. I'm the worst, you know? And so that's what's always really interested me about this dynamic of sin is it's like one of the most empowering, helpful things for me was like coming to the idea of like, forgiving myself, which is also kind of a Christian idea too, to some extent, but like that I'm okay, it's okay, I'm not the worst. So like, how did you deal with that dynamic?
I mean, it's like very complicated because on the one hand, Jesus is your best friend, or like God is your best friend, and you have this person who, you know, loves you and accepts you for who you are. And it's like very intimate. It was very strong for me, that kind of connection that I felt. And it made me very peaceful, and it made me understand the world. And, you know, just psychologically, it's like nice to tell this invisible friend all your worries, and it really works.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's also like you want to certain things you're not supposed to do because like everything's sexual basically. Like because it's not what God wants for you, and it's not good, and yet of course like you feel like I don't even think that I had like many sexual urges left by the end of my long celibacy, but just like maybe a desire to be close to somebody or like to share my life. Like of course I had like a desire for romance or all that, and then you're like, but like does God not want me to have that? Because otherwise he would have given that to me. So it became very complicated because I'm already suffering because I don't have romance, but then I also have to like on this meta level, I also have to like justify why this entity who says he loves me won't give me the thing that I want the most. And so that became like really complicated to me. Like on the one hand, it's like cool because in the decision-making process, you're like, oh God, what do you think? And then, oh, God helps me make a decision. So I kind of don't have to take all the responsibility. Yeah. But then it's also like, but like, why don't you support me when I need you? And it was just like, I just wanted to get rid of that whole like umbrella and just kind of do things for myself, I think. And that was like part of, I also didn't kind of believed it historically then increasingly. I loved, like, I was at home like recently, my sister was there, and I think we'd watched a film with something like about God. And then my sister said something like, yeah, but like, it's not like Jesus really existed. And my parents just like looked at her, and I looked at her, and I'm like, does she not realize that my parents actually really believe? I'm like, that's hilarious to me. She's like, she never got it. Yeah. Like how serious it is, Yeah. That it's like such a reality. But yeah, I think I just, it felt like more and more of a burden. Mm-hmm. And I just got more and more curious to see the world without that black and white filter, and like to become less judgy, which I failed at, but it was a try.
Well, yeah, it is one that's I never thought about that dynamic, but the dynamic of that, like, you're like, this is my best friend or my confidant, my number one supporter. But like, why isn't he giving me the thing?
Yeah, like, and it makes you crazy. I mean, I think once I almost lost my mind. I'd fallen in love with a guy in LA. I dated a lot of Americans, and I had zero money, but I wanted to go to LA for 3 months. But I literally had $50, and I was like, okay, I need a sign from God if I can go. But I just didn't, like, no jobs came in. I worked as a translator mostly back then. And I was like, but I mean, this would be the only sign that I need so that I can actually fucking buy a ticket, and like nothing happened. And I was just like, I can't believe it. Like, why wouldn't God want me to, like, I finally meet a guy that I like. And I guess I like lost my faith in a way over that relationship because I was like, I have to do it. And then a friend actually said to me, I was like, I don't know what to do. And she was like, that it doesn't matter. Like, you can do both things, and there would be consequences for both things, but there's no right or wrong. You can just choose. You can choose. And I was like, it seems so silly now, but it was just like, because I was just like so obsessed with like making the right decision. And she was like, there is no right decision. Yeah. And for me, that was like, oh my God, that's so freeing.
Yeah, totally.
And I mean, I think that can happen apart from a religious context as well, that you just get obsessed with like, I have to like know what the future will hold if I go down this path. Yeah. And you just never know,
Well, that's the thing. Before we started recording, we were talking about Rob leaving, and I was saying, like, it's funny to me that people always take these types of decisions as like, and now this is it, final, forever. And like that, I feel like I have that reaction because I had kind of the same, not in this religious context that you're talking about, but the same thing where I was like, if I do this, then what's gonna, like, am I gonna regret it for the rest of my life if I go to that club? And it's like, you just open doors and you kind of look around, and if it's wrong, you go back and you try a different door.
I know. Yeah, it's really not that scary, but I think a lot of people are obsessed with making the right decision because you don't want to waste time, I guess. I don't know. Or you don't want to look like a fool.
Yeah. So, we can, I know I keep saying, like, we're going to really wrap it up with the religion thing.
It's just fascinating.
I mean, to me, it is interesting. But the signs thing, like looking for signs thing, because I am a little bit woo woo, and occasionally I will, I would also describe myself as like agnostic, and I would, add the extra like hippie layer that I do believe there's some sort of like universal fabric, and like sometimes it's not like things are like meant to happen or not meant to happen, but like I heard it described once as like every once in a while there'll just be like a little like hint of like this might be something, and so I do sometimes a little bit look for.
Yeah. It's also fun to like discover little things, or like, oh, was that meant for me?
Yeah, like it's a synchronicity or whatever.
Yeah.
So do you still feel like, are you still open to there being some sign or like meaning imparted to you, or is that chapter kind of closed with the serious sign seeking you did with God?
I think that is close. I do think I still believe in it's sort of like a general goodness. I feel like I still believe that like love will win sort of thing. And I have like no basis for that. It's just like, I think it's what I prefer. Like I want to live in a world where that's true, and that's like all I can say about it.
Yeah.
But other than that, I don't really feel, I mean, there are always like weird coincidences that are like make me happy. But you can be also just as touched about a nice coincidence, and you don't know, it can be just as magical in a way. Because I don't have any concept what this universe or entity might be. So I don't have an emotional connection. Like with God, it was like, oh, that was his proof of love to me. So it's super meaningful. But if it's just like, it's the universe out there, then it's not personal to me, and it doesn't mean that much.
Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't touch me.
Yeah. I will say that for me, sometimes it's stupid. Like, for example, last night I was coming home from a show, and I stopped at Frankfurter Ali to get a kebab, and then I went down to the U-Bahn home, and normally, it's like can be like 15 minutes, and it was coming in 2 minutes.
Oh my God.
And I was like,
I know.
It's gonna be warm when I get home.
I know.
I don't know who's looking out for me, but I love it.
Honestly, that is the big city's person's like kiss from heaven, isn't it? Especially late at night. I know. I mean, I think that's like one of the things that I really miss is like that there's nobody to say thank you for, because I think when you're a Christian and something nice happens, you're like, thank you, God. And it's like so nice to be able to express gratitude, because it sort of like makes it bigger. And that's something that is a little bit of a void in my life now, I would say. I do meditate, kind of like mindfulness stuff. And I really enjoy how impersonal it is, and that it's not really connected to anything. And that's like really healing, I think. But it's like nice to have a communication with someone, but I kicked him out.
Yeah. Well, and, but the great thing about him is he'll forgive you.
I guess so. I mean, it's true. Like if you do actually believe in God, then God will be bigger than anything that I'm going to do anyway. So why would he care if I believe in him or not?
Well, so
or her
or whatever. I think it's also hilarious that like God like created the world, like created everything, all matter, all beings. But then we're like, but he's still on the binary gender system that he.
Yeah,
like.
I mean, it was written a long time ago. Bless them.
Bless their heart.
Bless their heart.
But so you went to a comedy show, then you're in church, you're like writing some jokes.
Yeah.
And like why like you okay, now let me just try to summarize if I can. You go to film school, you start to kind of like lose some faith. You start to view the world a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And when does the seed of comedy come in? Like that, like, oh, I want to perform or something.
I think it's just like, it was like a magical moment. I don't really know how it's for other people, because I know like some people go and watch shows for months and months before they go on stage. And I think I had like sort of lots of faith. I dated this guy. I eventually went to LA for 3 months, and I had like $50 in my bank account. I had to borrow money. It wasn't great, but it was like what I wanted to do. And it wasn't like a great relationship. It eventually ended. But, you know, it was what it was.
Well, God tried to tell you.
I know. I just wouldn't listen and wanted to have sex. And then I was like really depressed just because I'd finished film school and I just didn't really understand how to get into film business. I was kind of like, didn't really know what to do with my life. And I think I was really looking for a way to express like maybe the frustration I was feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's when, and I never really watched much comedy growing up, but I'd started just like getting into stand-up as an art form. And so it just kind of like, it was just like the perfect storm where I had a real burden to talk about that I had sort of left my faith behind and that I was like really critical of things. And I wanted to share it with not the Christians, but with other people. And it was just fun. I think it also like some friends had moved away maybe, and I was feeling a little lonely like socially. So that was also like, ooh, there's a community here. That's fun. And yeah, it was just like a perfect storm, I think. And I was just there and I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do.
And what was your experience like the first time? Was it? I
think the first time it went pretty well because I think I just had a good angle. I was like, I was a judgmental Christian. Everyone's like, oh my God. That's like the only joke I remember. I don't really, but I remember it went pretty well. And like the then established comedians were like, oh, everybody's going to hate you because you did well the first time. But then I also like, I totally bombed like after that because I tried to like write a new set for every, you know, what beginners try and do foolishly. But I think just because I was like fairly confident on stage, it was always like okay. Obviously I bombed a lot, but
and did you feel like from the experience of doing like the preaching thing, like that affected you less or
I think it was more that I was like, oh, I'm maybe not cool enough. Because like I perceived the other comedians to be like so worldly and like everybody was like talking about sex and drugs, things that I had very little experience with. And I think it's actually through stand-up that I started really dating because I'd had sex once or twice. I guess I dated like 2 people, but like this kind of like going out and having like casual sex, I kind of feel like it happened because of comedy, because I was like, oh, it's just going to be an experience that I can talk about on stage in a way. Not that I do it because of the stage, but it was just like, oh, it's just all an experience. It's fine. Like everybody here is doing it. So, okay, I'll try it, you know?
But that is one of the things I think that is like a great gift of comedy is that you can like in the moment of anything happening good or bad, you're like, well, maybe I'm going to get something funny out of this. Yeah. And I think like
nothing bad can happen to a comedian.
Yeah. You know? Yeah, exactly. Which I think is such a can be like really like a gift, you know?
Yeah. I totally, because in the Christian mindset, you're always protecting yourself from bad experiences because bad experiences are always like, they're going to take you away from God. And this protection really kind of removes you also from the world a lot. And I think it made me say no to a lot of things. And I think I was just kind of ready to say yes.
Yeah.
Yes to bad one night.
Yeah. And like from the start with comedy, was it something that you were like did you stop and start, or you know at first were you kind of just going once in a while, or did you get like jump right in with?
First of all, you have to remember we didn't have as many mics, so there was like maybe one mic per night, and so you wouldn't always get on because we were more than 8 comedians in the scene. So you had like maybe 2 or 3 mics a week. Maybe some people got like the better ones maybe got more spots, but that's kind of what I did. And
what a more manageable level for your social life.
I know. Seriously. It's insane. It must be insane now because you go from 0 to 100.
Yeah. Like I have I feel like my kind of guiding star in comedy is just that it's like you like everything I've heard from comedians, successful, famous comedians on podcasts is like, you have to do it all the time. You have to do it all and so like, that's kind of my thing. And I do get like a thrill on like if I can do multiple shows in a night, it's amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes I'm like,
I can't do it. I just don't have that energy level. But I mean, of course, sometimes I do it, like that I do it literally every night, but it's very rare. I really enjoy having nights off. But that's like what the pandemic definitely taught me, that it's like really good for me.
Yeah.
I did have a phase like after a year where I stopped for 3 months because I felt like I was getting really cynical. And I didn't like it, and I was like, oh, I don't know, like, because that's what stand-up does to you, because it's like so cool to be like, oh, the world is fucked up, there's no hope. And I think because I'd come from this other background, I kind of really dove into it and like maybe doubled down on it, and I was afraid that I was like changing too much as a person, and I didn't really like it. And also maybe I had like a writer's block, I don't really remember. And so I stopped for like 3 months, and I wasn't really sure if I was gonna start again. But then I kind of did, and I had new material, and then I had like so much new material all at once. Like sometimes when you take a break, it's just like, and it was like flowing. I was just like, oh no, this is too fun. And also I wasn't really sure at first if I could write about anything else but my faith, because that felt like the motivation. And I was like, well, maybe once I've done like my 2 sets about being religious, maybe that's it. Maybe I don't know how to write about anything else. Maybe I have nothing else to say. And so it took a little while to like figure that out. Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting thing also, because it's like, I feel like a critique I got from some other comedians, like when I was starting out here, was like, okay, you're talking about your moms again. You're talking about your moms again. And then it became a thing where I was like, okay, like now I kind of feel like I need to try to like write a joke about something non-related, or like build, like, can I do a 5-minute set and not mention? You know?
Totally. I understand. Totally. Yeah.
And then I did it, and then I was like, yeah, but this is still the thing that I'm processing the most, like,
Absolutely.
It's like I could talk about, my relationship with Anya, or whatever, liking partying, or, my job or something. And it's like, those are interesting things too, but it doesn't, I'm like, I still have so much more to say about my childhood, and I haven't even found the right ways to say a lot of the things.
I'm totally, and I'm so sure. And also, like, it's not bad to have like a thing that like is your mark, or like that defines you. It's like, yeah, the guy with 2 moms, and everybody knows who it is. And like a lot of comedians don't have that, to be honest, and it's nobody's fault. Like somebody were just blessed with more complicated biographies.
Yeah.
But for comedy, it is obviously like really good.
Yeah. No, I mean, well, and I think what's interesting about it for me is that it also is making me, because it's always something that is like, oh, that was my childhood, but now that I'm trying to talk about it, like,
I mean, you still have those 2 moms.
I still have those 2 moms. I still have them. They're out there. But what's interesting about it also, I think, is that it's like it's made me go back and like re-examine, like it's like I'm going. This is a terrible analogy, but like you're going back to like a crime scene, and you're like, oh, like look at that, like, okay, kid's always saying that.
Yeah.
That's why I'm, this part of me, or whatever.
Yeah.
And
or it's like the first time that I watch The Princess Bride.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know?
Yeah.
Like I didn't understand that it was like comical or like a farce, and I just thought like it's a fairy tale, like a weird. And then later I was like, oh, it was like completely different.
Yeah.
Now it's like hilarious.
Yeah.
Our life was always meant to be a comedy.
Yeah.
We just didn't know it.
And what about like, do you have any like strategies around like writing practices? Like, do you try to write regularly, or do you just write when the mood strikes? Do you do anything to try to like prompt that?
I took like a couple of writing classes, like from Paul, I think. I definitely got some bits out of that. I think for me, it's very like intuitive, that I just like when I have an idea, something happens to me, and I'm like, oh, that probably is a bit, like I just put it in my phone. And then it's more like when I'm like, okay, I've been bored with my set, I need to write something new. And then like normally it's like an hour before I have to leave, I just like, and then I stress out and I try to work out a new bit. but I don't do it like very like on a set date, or like I'll do it once a week. I'll just kind of do it when I feel like it. And I think the most important thing for me is like I have a lot of ideas when I fall asleep, just because I think I turn off my rational mind, and I really just like really take my phone and like record it. Either I normally dictate it because I'm like too tired, but like it's sometimes like an hour where it just stuff like keeps coming, and it's like really because I have like really bad sleep, like I have like a difficulty falling asleep anyway, so it's just like, and it's cool I lost another hour. But it is like such valuable time, because for me it's a lot about really specific wording that is like funny or that brings me joy actually. And so like to find like a beautiful funny way to word something is, I mean, it's like a precious little gift. So you just can't let that go, and you will not remember it in the morning, whatever you think. You will not.
Yeah, that's something for myself, because maybe not an hour, but I will get ideas like as I'm falling asleep.
Yeah.
And I just had too many times where I'm like, you're so tired, and you're like, oh, this is so good, I'll definitely remember
it's like so clear. It's like, or like just one tag. This is such an obvious tag. I will never forget it. But
and the worst part is like, you will remember that you had an amazing tag.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I'll wake up and be like, that was an amazing tag. I have no idea what it was.
It's amazing, like how little the brain. It's crazy.
Yeah. And so you said you did comedy in German and English when you were starting.
No, I did it after. So I started in 2015, and then in 2018 I started German.
Okay.
Yeah, just because everybody was like, why aren't you doing it? And then I just I think I was a little bored with the English after 3 years, maybe, needed a new challenge, like Rob wanted a new challenge. And I mean, it's obvious. And then also like the industry had like grown a little bit, and so there were a lot of opportunities, and I was like, okay, yeah, it's a little stupid not to at least try.
Yeah.
And then I did it for 3 years, and I mean, I had an amazing time. I really did. I got so many opportunities because there are very few women, and I got to go on TV like after a couple of months, which is, not okay, but that's how it was.
Yeah. But at the same time, if that's the opportunity, that's amazing.
Yeah,
like,
of course I'm going to say yes. Yeah. But I always I always struggled because in direct comparison, because I did pretty much the same jokes in German and English, it always felt like so much more enjoyable and natural to me to do it in English. And I always felt like, especially the religious stuff, I'm quite sarcastic, and the religious stuff, it just never connected as much to the German audience. And so, I mean, I had like amazing sets I killed there as well, but just like in general, I just always felt more at home in the international scene, maybe also because I didn't feel like super German. But I just, like religion is not something that Germans talk about like that. It's just like not, I feel like it's not something that people are like that interested in. It's like very much a private matter.
Not like that it's taboo. It's just kind of like, who cares?
Yeah, exactly. People are just like not like people.
It's not like in America.
No, exactly. It's the opposite. And I think just because I have an American accent and when I do it in English, like I'm so much more self-explanatory, even though I'm German. Like I know it doesn't make sense because it's not my accent. It has nothing to do with my biography. But like for the religion, it just like works so well. It's like really weird.
Yeah, totally. That's interesting. And do you ever get tempted to like think about doing? Because I mean, I don't know. Like I was talking to Faye, who here, and is it either has already been on the podcast or is going to be on the podcast soon, depending on how these come out. But she was telling me about like doing German comedy, and she was like, she did a roast battle, and then afterwards one of the comedians came up to her and was like, I'm gonna get you like a writing job or some writing work or whatever. And I was like, it was cool to hear about her experience, but it was also eye-opening to me because I was like, right, like that's the thing that's just not ever going to happen in the English scene here. That could happen if you were in the States somewhere.
I mean, Pavlo has gotten like, he's written on the roast battle, even though he only speaks English pretty much, but it's very, I mean, that's kind of like what changed my career as a screenwriter, because then I had like German stuff out on YouTube. And then I was like, and then I did the late night show with Chahak. I wrote on that, and that really opened so many doors. And then I got writing jobs as a screenwriter in German, because then I was like oh, you're a comedy writer. Oh, we have so much need for female comedy writers.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I didn't even know, because my film school was so artsy that they didn't even mention TV, you know?
Yeah.
And so that was, for that it was amazing. And for that, I always should have done it. But actually, when you ask me if I think about going back, I had the most absurd moment. 2 weeks ago, I was on this mini tour in Budapest and Amsterdam. And it went really badly.
Oh, no.
Because I'm like so bad at marketing. And, you know, I just don't know how to get people to come to shows. And I was in Amsterdam in front of 6 people doing my hour, having a lot of eye contact with every single person in the room. And then I look on Instagram, and one of my best friends, Phyllis, who started German comedy when I started it, she was opening for Felix Lobrecht in front of 12,000 people. I mean, it was so bizarre.
And you're doing an hour?
I know. And I mean, like, honestly, like, in a way, like, of course it's more satisfying for me to do an hour, and I love doing it. And like, when I do my solo show, I'm like, this is what I was meant to do and whatever. But it was like, I'm insane. Like, this is career suicide. I'm so stupid. Yeah. So it was a little, I mean, I could laugh about it, but also, I mean, I think because it is hard work. We were talking about like grinding, and like that your generation don't have all these experiences of like, performing in front of 3 people. I mean, it was like an amazing experience. I mean, I lost so much money. It's so bad. And I learned a lot, you know, to like, it's better to perform at actual comedy clubs, because they will support you more. And like the venues that I was at, they didn't advertise at all, basically. So I thought like they would help me, but they didn't. I couldn't really work out if they didn't care, or if they were like overwhelmed, or. Yeah. So yeah, that makes it really hard. But when you're in a comedy club, like people who are looking for comedy natural will probably look up that website, and so oh my God.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So and so did that make you think like, fuck, you guys should do a couple German sets, or
I mean, like I even like after the pandemic, like in the summer in between, I did German, and I was gonna open for this guy, but then I can't remember, like something fell through. And then like a couple of things like didn't work out, or it was like canceled because of rainy weather. And then I was like, fuck it. You know, I just want to concentrate on one thing and do that well. And then I was like, you know what, I'm going to do my solo show. And then that took up just so much focus. Like I just couldn't do it both at the same time and be really good at both, I felt.
And you're still also doing like screenwriting and stuff too,
I mean,
right?
I'm trying,
Yeah.
Like not all my days are very busy, but
But that's an interesting thing to think of, like that, because I was thinking about like if you're doing your like screenwriting or like television writing or whatever, however you want to call it, in German, I actually would maybe also go do what you're doing, and like I would like to have it compartmentalized, where it's like, oh, I do that thing in German, and then this performing thing, this is like my English.
Like to me, the way that I have chosen is perfect. It's just like the country doesn't accept me. Like, I mean, if I could find a booker who was like, I can book you an English speaking tour in Germany, I think it would work, because all the young Germans, they watch Netflix in English. They watch YouTube content in English. I think they're fine with it. I think it would totally work, but you have to like open the minds of people, and we don't have that infrastructure in Germany yet. So that's a shame. Or even in Europe. I mean, like there are like producers and like promoters coming up slowly, but it's just like not there. And I am not made to do that. You know, I will tour a little bit more, and I hope I'll do a little better, but it's just like, I don't enjoy it. I have a lot of talents. Those are not any of them.
No, I get that. I mean, I think it's that's the stuff that I'm at, I mean, at the level that I'm at, you know, where it's like, I don't like doing social media, which is maybe surprising because like I'm very active on it. But I consider it, I'm like, every job has a part that you don't like. And it's like, I love writing. I love performing. I love going to shows.
Yeah. But the thing is, like, you also have the skills already. Imagine you had to do it and you didn't have the skills. That's like a really big difference because, I mean, you put effort into it, but you put way less effort into it than somebody. And like, or like your result is like way better because you have the foundation.
Yeah.
I mean, I put a lot of effort into it. It just didn't get results.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, also like I was trying to have one of the comedians was showing me like how the Facebook ad thing. And I was like, oh my God.
Exactly. I know.
And she's like, you need the analytics. And I'm like, I don't care about the analytics. Never mind. But I wanted to ask you about your solo show. I'm always interested because you were talking about like this, this joke kind of ADD or whatever, right? When you like start to get like bored with certain of your jokes and you're like, I want to write something new. And like I went to Barcelona a few months ago and so like I was doing my like best 7 basically at all the shows, and I was like it was enjoyable because I was doing well and people didn't know it and they're like, wow, this is good, you know? But at the same time, it's like what really the most thrilling part for me is when you have something new that you're excited to try. And so do you continue to try to make little tweaks in your solo show, or is it like something that you're just like, this is figured out, like this is a complete thing and I perform that, and then going to smaller mics or something is a place where I can, you know, try a new tag or try putting this thing in front of that thing or whatever?
I mean, when I performed it for the first time, I was like, okay, cool, this is the structure, this makes total sense. But since then, I've noticed that actually it makes more sense to have this bit further at the front of the story, because I very much tell a story, so it is very much that it kind of follows up on other bits and like also with callbacks and stuff. So I've been changing the order quite a bit and like tried things. And then I forget to do it on stage, and then and then there's definitely like tags, and also like taking it outside of Berlin, you realize that certain references don't work. Like I make jokes about dark rooms, and then I realize I actually have to kind of explain dark rooms, like even if it's just a tiny little bit, because people don't have sex clubs and it's just like not a culture in like other cities. Or I have this bit about that losing my faith is like going on the U8 for too long and you slowly lose a part of your soul because so many crazy things happen. And for Berliners, it's super funny. And then abroad, I don't always remember doing it like that. I asked someone beforehand, like, is there like a shitty bus line where people are always on meth or something? Or sometimes I do it as a little bit of a crowd working bit, because I feel like I have to explain that something about how losing my faith, and I want to make it funny. Or maybe I have to write a completely different bit that works everywhere. But sometimes it works really well because they know exactly what I mean. And sometimes they're like, in Amsterdam, they're like, no, everything here is perfect.
Yeah, they're like, we have no shitty. Because I was going to say, I feel like almost every city I've been to, there is like, you're like, oh, that's the bus line that gets.
Yeah, like in Budapest, people knew exactly like, oh, the number 4.
Yeah.
So like that's the kind of stuff that you learn taking it abroad. And yeah, I feel like little tags, or just like even tightening up more and more. And I think that's still like really fun. So even though it is repeating, some of these bits are like years old now, and that's not as exciting, but it's always exciting to tell it to people who've never heard it before in a way. And because it's like part of something bigger. And so I think there's always ways to keep it interesting.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Well, I feel like we should wrap up here. Are you interested in spinning the wheel?
Yeah, let's
do it. Do you want to spin the wheel? Yeah. Let's spin the wheel.
Oh, I can't wait for British bloke. You booked that, huh?
Ooh, Afterlife. That's very appropriate for this podcast.
It is, isn't it? I really have like nothing to say about it, and that is like really nice for me. Like just to be able to say I don't know, because I'm like a smart ass and like on stage and off, and I really enjoyed as a Christian to have like all the answers to everything and the Bible verse, and it was like really satisfying. And now I'm just like, I really don't know. I mean, I guess like maybe something continues, but I also don't care, which is amazing that it doesn't like.
Are you excited to find out?
I mean, I'm not afraid of dying, so I think that must mean that I have a sort of positive outlook, or like that I don't assume like something bad will happen, and maybe it also means that I don't think I'll just rot in the ground.
Yeah.
How about you?
I believe in like some level of the reincarnation thing. There's this. Do you know Duncan Trussell?
I do. I haven't listened to him a lot.
Yeah, but so he said one time on his podcast something that has always stuck with me. It's this great analogy where he's like, like if the light bulb burns out, you unscrew the light bulb and then you screw a new light bulb in and then it lights up again. But it's like the light bulb wasn't the thing that made the light inside the bulb.
Yeah.
And that I think is kind of the perfect analogy. It's like it's not like there's like me is gonna exist again, but like everything in the universe, from my very, very minuscule understanding of science, is like energy and these like energy marks. So I'm like, on some level I'm energy, and that energy is gonna go somewhere, and then it's energy always has to become something new. So I think I probably believe that on a certain level. But I think the way more interesting idea is like, what does that mean for, the life before death? Like, does that put people under pressure to like do something great with their lives, or are they like, oh, the best is yet to come, so it's not like that big of a deal if I'm like an amazing person here because I can be with God, that can be a thing. So I think I'm always like torn between like, oh, it's just fine to like live every day and be a good person, or like, no, you should work really hard to leave a mark and to contribute like what only you can contribute to the world. And then I'm like, oh, that's like disgusting and conceited. And so I'm like, I think I'm always like torn between like humble and like. Yeah, I think both of those are like very valid. And I think what's interesting hearing like that to me in a way is a more like explains the difference in our backgrounds, because the way I think about that same idea of like if an afterlife affects how I am here is it's more about the experience. I'm like, being alive is like a gift and it's super amazing. Yeah. And so it's like, fucking get everything, get every last drop. But at the same time, I also recognize that it's like that mentality also can cause you suffering.
Exactly,
you need some of that, like, Buddhist Zen or the Christian like trust that there's something better coming, to be able to just sit and be like, well, what a great sunset.
Exactly. And it's like hard to figure out. Maybe it's a balance. I think it's probably the balance. That's why, like no German comedy. I'm going to focus on English so I can have a couple nights off a week. Yeah. And not feel bad about it. And like just sit there and have a glass of wine or see friends that are not connected to comedy. Yeah. All these things.
Totally. Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, and also I think to tie it into comedy, it's like, to do good comedy, like you need to exist in the world.
Exactly. Like, I mean, some comedians are like, yeah, you should have a day job so you have something to talk about besides just like hanging out with comedians or being on tour, if you're there. Yeah. Like, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense actually. I mean, that's why a lot of comedians talk about their family lives, because that's like, because I remember when Judd Apatow like released his special and somebody was like really single. I was like, oh yeah, what's a millionaire gonna tell us that's relatable? And like, oh yeah, guess what? He has a wife and kids. So yeah, it was like pretty fucking normal.
Yeah, dad stuff and the whole thing. My audio recorder is gonna die momentarily. I just noticed. Okay. So I'm gonna try to wrap this thing up before we lose the audio. But thank you so much for coming. This was super fun. I'm sorry we didn't get more than one wheel spin in, but this was super fun. It was. And please plug your social media, or you have your solo show that people should definitely come see.
Yes. So yeah, find me under Freddi with an I. You can just Google Freddi and stand up Berlin. You'll find me, and you don't have to spell my last name.
And if you're watching on YouTube, the link is in the description. Nice. But if you're listening.
Yeah. And then I have a solo show coming up on the 26th, which might be before this comes out. But on the 24th of June, I'm definitely going to have my solo show again. And probably in July for the previews at the CCB. The Fringe previews. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. Well,
Yeah.
find Freddi. Come watch her show. She's super funny.
Church Girl Interrupted. as
Church
well.
Girl Interrupted. Thank you so much. This was
Thank
awesome.
you so much. I had so much fun.
Oh, good. Yay.